Hi, and thanks for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec Podcast, where I'll help you create teams worth leading, because life's too short to lead mediocre teams. As always, I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, advisor, coach, consultant to tech execs worldwide, and our subject today is annoying your team. Something that I think is critical is to realize that we're not supposed to make sure our team is always happy. It doesn't matter if you care about them. Well, it does matter. You should care about them. But that does not mean that you always have to ensure that they're pleased. It's the same with my kids. I love them, but I'm not gonna let them do whatever they feel like doing just so they're always smiling and happy and I avoid some tantrums. Sometimes we have to learn where to put our foot down, where it really matters. And too often, this also becomes a point of contention between the CTOs and the VPs of engineering I work with and the CEOs. If you actually start talking solely in the terms of what the team needs, what the team cares for, ensuring that the team is happy. Yeah, you need to care about morale. You need to ensure that people are not getting burned out. That's a subject for a different episode. But a lot of the times we take it too far, or we see that as the easiest thing to control. Maybe we were burned ourselves in the past from managers who did not take care of us enough. Maybe you just really like your team and you really care about them, and you're making the mistake of confusing caring for them with overprotecting them. And when we do these things, you know what CEOs tell me? They say, I'm afraid that my VP of engineering is too concerned about the well-being of the team at the cost of they having a bit of a nicer week, getting a few more perks, having to juggle tasks a bit less, but this will come at the cost of us not shipping things on time, not actually creating a successful company. At the end of the day, if the company is not going to succeed, we're all going to be much less better off because we're not going to have a job, right? And that's something that you have to keep in mind. It is not a sign of a good leader if your team is always happy. For me, I can tell you, I've worked with some people who were constant pleasers. I had managers who were constant pleasers. And was it nice? Like in general, the day-to-day itself was nice? Yeah, of course, because they always sought to please us. But those usually define the periods where we had the least amount of impact, where people had the least amount of actual growth. Maybe they had more dry growth because they had more time and more ability to choose what to do. So maybe they played a bit more with some frameworks they wanted. But when it came to the growth that you get from actually shipping, working software, seeing what customers are saying about it, implementing the changes needed, having these iterations, those don't come easily when we don't know how to face the fact that sometimes what we do is not the right stuff. Sometimes we have to react faster. Sometimes we have to change lanes. Sometimes, even though you really want to work on that specific project, that's not the right thing for the team. Those things, I think, actually help speed up our experience much faster. And that's something that I would rather see much more. Side note, I'm hearing that there's some work happening outside. I hope you cannot get that through the mic. But apologies, don't have any time else to record. So we're going to have to try it this way either way. Now, another thing about this annoying people is that sometimes when we prod people, when we stop just letting them have what they think they want, you can actually see people for the first time in a long while start talking about what they care about, what's actually important. They start thinking about what they want to do. They're not just doing what, the knee-jerk reaction of what I feel like I'd like to be doing this week, but they're actually doing things that they realize that they can't get everything, and therefore they start prioritizing. They start thinking about what they actually want to do. And this is a big part of creating a team that grows, matures, and gets seniorified faster, and which is a big part of my thesis. I believe that too many teams do not push people to learn and grow professionally fast enough because we are coddling them too much, because we are overprotecting them, not letting them have enough exposure to the elements, to the outside world, see how things really are. And that's, a bit like deciding that you're afraid of your baby ever getting any virus, so you're going to be keeping them at homes for so long that eventually, I don't know, they're 4-year-old, you're taking them on vacation and they get all the viruses in the world within a week. You don't want to be doing that. You are much better off starting this exposure much earlier. A few things you can start thinking about to notice when you're falling for that tendency of pleasing them as opposed to annoying them where needed. One, if you sense that you're doing something because you have this fear, this worry, this anxiety of someone getting angry, someone not feeling happy, wait a second before you react, before you start to fix things for them. Take a second and think, would you be so worried about this happening to you as well? A lot of the times we think that, yeah, it's fine that if it's happening to me, but what about the team? The team cannot have that. No, you are not your team. Sometimes, there are things that an executive has to live with, and you wouldn't expect an IC to go through the same, of course. Yet, a lot of the changes, a lot of the stress that we seem like overly worried about, that we feel that we have to protect the team from, are things that are natural, are things that you probably went through in the early stages of your career, and it didn't feel like it was a mistake for it to happen. Sometimes it was annoying, sometimes it added some stress, but who doesn't have some stress, especially if we're working in startups? I'm guessing you did not go to work at IBM, that was my first real job. Okay, I went to IBM. Yeah, it's nice. Deadlines are very lax. You can just do whatever technically you want to be doing, and people are generally pleased, at least where I was. But that's not where you get fast growth. That's not where you maximize your potential a lot of the times. No offense to fellow IBMers, but I think that if you've chosen the path of leading a team, and I go back always to the first sentence I say, I'm trying to help you create a team worth leading. So if you sense that you're rushing there to protect them so they don't get pissed, take a second and think, is it really that bad? Another thing that can help you spot it is when people come to you complaining about things, you often have the knee-jerk reaction, the instinct of rushing, saying, yeah, sure, I'm on it. Yeah, let me check into that. But take a second and think, is it really that bad? Again, if you were in that scenario 5-10 years ago when you were an IC, how would you react? And I'm not saying that whatever you did is right. I'm not saying that you have to have this gatekeeping where if things were terrible for us, they have to be terrible also for our team. That's not the point. The point is that sometimes we seem to look at things so differently through the lens of our roles that we do things that are not correct for the team. So when you spot yourself having that anxiety, that pressure in your chest to run and protect them, to run and make sure that no one harms them, take a second and think, what's going to happen? Like, what's the worst case scenario here? Are people going to quit just because they had to shift things in the middle of the sprint once? I mean, if they are, they're probably not the right fit for the team anyway. And if the team just becomes that important, it means that we become too rigid most of the times to have a healthy, responsive, agile, nimble, and non-egoistic team. If I'm always protecting people, I'm sort of always protecting their feelings, which means that also providing them feedback in the future will be much, much, much harder. Once we get to the point of cuddling people, protecting them, you will usually also start avoiding telling them to their faces they're not actually management material right now. They're not gonna get that promotion. They are not senior engineers or principals or whatever yet. And if you fear addressing those, you will create a team that's not getting better with time, but a team that actually loses momentum as it ages. And that's a surefire way to create a team that's not going to be fun managing at all. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. I hope I made you think a bit better about your tendencies. One last bit before letting you go. As I'm recording this, we still have half of December left, and I'm running throughout December a going out of business sale. Why? Because I'm going out of business in Israel and I'm moving in 2026 to my new entity here in Italy. And therefore, anyone who closes one of my regular 3-month advisory deals, which I usually go by, in December, paying still to the old entity, will actually get 2 extra months. So you have 2 weeks to get a move on. You have my email in the show notes if you want to grab some time, talk about the details, and see if we're a match. Get to it. Not a lot of time left. And also, always check out my newsletter. Link is also in the show notes. And I'll see you here next week. Ciao.